Thank you and welcome to this episode of Auditing the Age. It is always a pleasure to welcome you, and we want to express our appreciation for your taking of your time to watch these programs as we bring them to you. I thought that I would use today to join a conversation that our country is presently having. And this is a conversation on gender-based violence. I thought I will suspend my broadcasts in terms of us following the thing that we have been dealing with for the last couple of months. But I thought it is important that maybe we also say something on what the President has called an epidemic, which is gender-based violence. And I think the number one thing to say would be to say it is not, we are not people who are known for violence against women. And it should therefore be thought of as quite strange and serious that in recent years we find ourselves having to deal with issues of violence against women and children. And we must be able to ask ourselves questions as to how have we come to that? How have we evolved to that? I am a little bit concerned that some of us are not treating this issue with the seriousness it deserves. They are a little dismissive of these issues, and I don't know what informs that, but I think this particular issue is an issue of national importance, and it is a serious feedback to us as the people of South Africa on what it is that has gone wrong with our society. And I would hope that all of us can look at this and treat it as serious as it should be treated, and give the appropriate response that it deserves. So I think the number one thing to say would be to say it is a very unfortunate thing that our mothers, our sisters, our grandmothers, our daughters, our wives should suffer harm at the hands of their fellow brothers, sons, husbands, citizens. It's quite unfortunate. It is quite disheartening, and it's something that has to stop, and it's something that all of us must take upon ourselves to bring it to a place where it ceases to happen. I'm not of the view that some of these things can be fixed, via legislation only. I think that approach is an important one, but I actually don't think that this is a legislative matter in terms of how it can come to resolution. And I don't think this is a criminal justice matter, even though that is also important, because once someone is arrested, they are then isolated from society, and therefore they can't do any more harm to society. But I think our approach to this matter should be informed by, number one, the urgency of the matter, but number two, it should be informed by a long-term resolution of the matter. We must be able to say what we are doing now will resolve this issue once and for all. I do believe that the president was correct in identifying gender-based violence as an epidemic. And therefore we must be able to begin to say, what can we do to treat this epidemic? What can we do to make sure that it doesn't continue to infect more and more men? We must also be able to say, how can we assist South Africa's women to make sure that they do not continue to suffer harm at the hands of their fellow citizens. So I think if we seriously look into this issue and give it the attention it deserves, we will be able to deal with it in a manner that uproots this particular abnormality from our society once and for all. I do think that there's something to be said about the empowerment of women. By that I mean we have to create conditions where women are able to acquire the skills they need in order to be able to generate income for themselves, for their families. So we must be able to say issues of economic empowerment are integral to how we deal with this issue. Because for as long as women are dependent on men for issues of income and survival, and that then exposes women to a situation where they are not able to protect themselves from abusive relationships. It lands them into a situation where they have no means to actually sustain their own livelihoods, so that they are able to move away from someone who abuses them in the name of he provides them income, he provides them shelter. And therefore we must be able to deal with that, to say our brothers and sisters should be able to make decisions, should be able to make decisions. Our mothers and sisters should be able to make decisions that are self-preserving, decisions that are that guarantee their safety. So most men ill-treat women because they are of the view that the women in their lives have no alternative in terms of where would they go if they moved out of the house where they happen to live and share with the abuser. And therefore we must be able to look at this issue in a manner that is helpful to the future economic prospects of all women. For as long as women are not economically empowered, we can expect that some of them will continue to stay in abusive relationships because the abuser happens to also be a provider. That is very important in bringing this issue to a place of resolution. I also want to say I do not think that there is any conceivable reason why a man should kill a woman. I can't conceive of that reason of why a man would kill a woman. And therefore I would want to say it would be important that we do not create a situation where the things we say may be interpreted to mean that there are justifications that people can conjure in order to justify why they would have harmed women, why they would have killed women. So I really do not think there is a conceivable, reasonable, rational justification to why we can be violent towards women and children. So I just wanted to be very clear and categorical on that issue so that none of us think it's possible for a justification to be brought about as far as this matter is concerned. Looking to social media, one has seen such things as women provoke men. One would have seen something like they cheat on men and all that. Honestly speaking, I don't think that can justify anyone harming a woman. We must be able to deal with these issues in a manner that is mature, in a manner that is respectful of other people's lives, in a manner that recognizes the humanity of the other, in a manner that also expresses our own humanity to the other. So we can't deal with issues in a manner that leaves people doubtful of our own humanity. I mean, you would have seen online the whole slogan of men are trash. I really don't agree with such slogans, because they don't contribute meaningfully to the resolution of the problem, but they just they polarize the conversation. They're not helpful in the resolution of these matters. And therefore, I do not think that these issues can be resolved with a simplistic approach. I do think that the resolution of these issues will take a multidisciplinary approach. It will take a multifaceted approach. And then these issues can be then dealt with in a manner that would resolve them. And so I do think that we should begin to be asking questions like, what is it in South Africa's society that would have contributed that would have contributed to the breaking down of things as we presently experience them? Because there's a profound brokenness that has attended our communities, And we must be able to really begin to understand it, because we cannot resolve that which we don't understand. And begin to see what it is that can be done by various stakeholders. For instance, the church can play its role in the resolution of this whole matter. The government can also play its role. And you can have NGOs, a lot of NGOs also playing their role, so that it is a concerted effort that is geared towards bringing restoration and, geared towards ridding our communities of this brokenness. Now, there is a historical aspect to this, and I will tell you why I'm bringing in a historical aspect to this whole matter. Because I think there is tension between the traditional view of what men represented and the modern demands upon men. The traditional view of men would give you a picture of a man who lives amongst his people, a man who owns land, he has access to land, he has food security, which means issues of food insecurity are not part of what keeps him worried. And he would have been a man who lives not just amongst his people, but he lives amongst his peers. And therefore, there is a whole question of acceptance, recognition that is attached to his name. And it may also be that recognition was also a commodity that was attached to his family name, because his great-grandfather would have done something heroic, and therefore he is recognized for that. And that respect and recognition is something that has been part of what the family values and identifies as important. And therefore, this would have been a different man than the modern day man. Because I'll tell you this, the modern day man his job is not guaranteed, because he is employed and there's so much there's so much oversupply of labor in the labor market, and therefore he can be fired anytime and someone can just replace him. So he is insecure as far as his job is concerned. But number two, his income limits what he can do. His income limits what he's able to do for his family. His income limits what he's able to do for himself. And therefore, even though he is employed and there is issues of insecurity in terms of his employment, but there is also an issue of him not being able to meet his needs through the salary that he gets. South Africa is quite a unique society in that it is highly unequal, and that inequality is racialized. But also in terms of poverty headcount, of all homes that are headed by women, 58% of them are poor. Of all homes that are headed by men, 56% of them are poor. And that is serious. That's quite a serious indictment into how, as a country, we have it speaks to what we have achieved, and it speaks to our failures, it speaks to the gaps that still exist. And of course, poverty is more rife within black communities than it is within white communities. And therefore we must be able to look at the statistics to say just how much abuse is there in terms of high income groups versus low income groups. We must be able to say, is there a correlation between the level of income and by extension, the stress, the economic stress that individuals face versus the high levels of income, and therefore the opulence that comes with that. You know, what are the numbers in terms of the statistics in terms of these income groupings? So I am quite sure, I'm quite convinced that high-income families experience less incidents of violence than would be the case with low-income families. There's a reason why townships seem to have higher incidence of crime than suburbs. Because I am of the view that there is something to be said about the economics of violence. You know, this is not just an issue that we can look into in a very narrow, way, because if we did that, then we would not be able to resolve it. I'm quite sure there's something to be said about the economics of violence. But there's also another aspect that I would want to highlight. It is true that in traditional societies, there was more support that was given to individuals and that was given to married people, because everyone lived in the same vicinity and there were less incidents of stress because issues of food security were covered. Issues of safety in general were also covered. And issues of affirmation, where individuals felt accepted, felt wanted, felt loved, were actually issues that were also covered because people lived in their own communities. They were loved, they were affirmed, because there was a way of affirming people within each and every community. Now, it is true that the modern setup outside of the context of the church is not very supportive. Because within the context of the church, then one is assured that there is a community of people who are interested in our well-being. One is assured that there is a community of people who are prepared to support us where they can. There's a community of people who can intervene in trying to resolve our challenges, even when those challenges seem to get out of control. So modern life is built around people waking up in the morning and going to work. And the environment at work is not built around your affirmation, it is not built around your acceptance, it is built around you delivering on the goals of that particular company for which you work. And it takes you the whole day. That part of your existence consumes much of your time. And then we come back home in the evening, there is little or no time to bond, little or no time to really have time where we can just, sit and reflect, take stock of where we are, and devise strategies and plans that speak to the future we want. Now, I am of the view that most people in today's societies, number one, are doing jobs they don't want to do. It's not jobs they studied for. It's not something they are passionate about. They're just doing it for issues, for issues of securing income, for reasons of securing income. Number two, I'm quite sure that as time has passed by, we have become less and less cohesive. As families, as communities. In other words, there's this distance that has come in between us. And it makes it impossible for us to be who we really want to be. Because for people to be who they want to be, a lot of issues must be at play. And therefore, I am of the view that disintegration in our communities is partly to blame for what is happening. Issues of poverty are also to blame for what is happening. You would remember that in the beginning I said any strategy that is developed that seeks to deal with this issue, but it is a strategy that does not take women on board in terms of economic empowerment, it won't work. And economic empowerment the more you spread it around, the more empowered people will be. I am of the view that there is a serious issue of an identity breakdown in terms of how people look at themselves and how they think others perceive them to be. There's also an important element of how they feel about themselves, because sometimes how they are perceived may not be necessarily true, but all of us know that how you feel about yourself is more important than how people perceive you. People may perceive you in a very positive light, but if you don't feel that about yourself, it really doesn't help. And so there's this issue of an identity crisis, an identity breakdown that all of us are experiencing. But we must understand that is not a new issue, and it is not like That was not to be expected. In our work, the identity crisis is something to be expected because of our history. You see, colonization and apartheid, their sole goal, their primary goal, was to dehumanize black people. Dehumanize them to a point where black people accept that they are not humans, they are less than humans. We were given inferior education. We were excluded in terms of the general development of society. We were not party to the development, and so our societal evolution was greatly managed. We were transplanted from our places of birth, and we were, transplanted into new territories, territories we didn't know, territories we were not connected to. Those are huge gaps. Huge gaps that were left just like that and not attended to. And there's also the issue of, now after you have been dehumanized, you must then be able to say, this is how far the dehumanization process has gone. And in order for me to rehabilitate myself, I need to do 1, 2, 3. We still don't have, the majority of South Africa's black people still don't have any meaningful access to participating and owning the economy. Much of South Africa's economy is still racialized, it is still white. The percentage of shares in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange that are owned by black people are less than 25%. So 75% is still owned by the white South Africans. Now, these are not issues that we bring up because we want a straw man to put blame on. No. We bring these issues up because they are part of what has brought us here. They are part of our history. They are part of our DNA. So in ignoring these issues, we are ignoring who we are presently. Because who we are presently is not minus the experience we have been through. It is not minus what we have experienced. There is no way we can be able to take stock of where we are, to take stock of who we are, while neglecting a certain part of our history. Now, there's something also very interesting about these issues. The issues of depression, one of the interesting area of research that psychologists and geneticists have begun to look into are issues of some type of depressions or some types of depressions may be genetic, in that if your parents lived under a very stressful situation for a long time, that has a way of altering their chemical makeup, and therefore it has a way of altering your DNA. Because the moment you alter the levels of happiness or sadness in a person's life, you are actually in the long term altering their DNA. And what if the DNA that is altered, so the DNA that was supposed to be able to cope with issues of stress and depression, and that particular gene is then compromised? What happens if that gene becomes a dominant gene in your children? Your children are less likely to be able to cope with certain things, because the whole question of them not being able to cope is genetic. It's not just based on experience only, what they're experiencing at the time, but it is also genetic. There is some sort of a propensity for your kids to suffer with depression. That remains for psychologists, psychiatry, it remains for geneticists to investigate. But we do know, here is what we know. We know that when soldiers have been to war, when they come back, they mostly suffer with mental issues, mental disorders. That we know. We know if someone has been, has undergone a traumatic experience, they've been robbed, someone in their family has been gunned down, we know they do suffer trauma. There's a psychological disorder that comes with that. So the question becomes, is economic deprivation not a trauma? We may have to, psychologists may have to look into this issue, whether economic deprivation is not a trauma. How much of a trauma that is. I mean, I know, because I grew up in a home where we didn't always have food. I know the type of stress my parents faced when there was no food at home. Now the question becomes, what if that type of experience is a daily experience for some people? What does it do to them? What psychological issues can be then activated because of that? Now it is true that our health system is not the best in the world. I mean, we must give credit where credit is due. Our government has really done well on issues of HIV and AIDS. They've done exceptionally well. Most of our people, there's about 7 million of our citizens who are HIV positive. Most of our people are on antiretrovirals, and that's something to be appreciated. Our government has done very well on tuberculosis. Our government does very well on issues of immunizing children, issues of primary health care access. I mean, our government has done very well, but our health system is nowhere in terms of coping with issues of psychological trauma, issues of mental disorders. And I'm of the view that we have a lot of those in our communities. And because we are people who were not raised within a culture that was able to shine light on issues of mental disorders. Number one, we are not able to recognize these issues. And number two, they are not even thought of as sicknesses, as disorders. And therefore, we have these things getting out of control, and we have not even been able to really identify the root causes of these issues. And so I'm saying there is an economic argument to be made, an economy of violence. Number two, I'm saying there's a sociological argument to be made. Our societies are not constructed like traditional societies. There is less support for modern day communities than there used to be in traditional societies. Number three, there is a mental disorder argument to be made. Our people most of them face stress, overwhelming stress, and therefore they undergo depression, and no one is there to even to help, to assist. So there is this issue of mental health that our health system is not able to deal with. And that is why the church is such an important force in society. Any society whose plan is to undermine the role of the church, that society will disintegrate in a huge way. And I'm not saying the church is perfect. I mean, the church has made a lot of mistakes. We have at times been found to be doing things that are insensitive to issues of the economic status of people. We've gone to the poor, and some of us have promised the poor, instant prosperity. And the poor gave what they could to really, get some sort of get hold of this instant prosperity that is being promised. And I think we are aware that there are some amongst us who do those things. There are some amongst us who do not represent the values of Scripture as they should be. But I'm of the view that the church does more good than harm. Honestly speaking, we don't want to take these isolated incidents and pretend that everyone is doing those things. That would not be a fair assessment on the work of the church. And so that is why my appeal would be, there's an opportunity here for the church to remake society as we know it. There's an opportunity here for the church to get involved in a very deliberate and strategic way, get involved to say, here is what we think should be done. Here is what we think, here is what we think is important for individuals to take note of. Without that support system, because the family itself has been weakened, and therefore people are living their lives with less and less support each and every year. And most people have gone online in search of affirmation. They've gone online in search of support. They've gone online in search of care. But the truth is, online you're going to find strangers. People who do not care for you. They are not your friends. These are people who do not know you. Now, what has happened with modern day approach to life is the transactional element that has been brought to life. I do this, you do this for me. That transactional element is really destroying our society. It's destroying our communities. Love is not transactional. Love is prepared to give itself without expecting anything in return. That is love as defined in Scripture. You can check 1 Corinthians chapter 13. The Bible is very clear in the book of Romans. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And the Bible is also very clear. It says, do not invite to your parties people who can invite you back. Invite the poor, those who can't invite you back. Give to the poor, those who can't give back to you. Why? Because in doing so, you have demonstrated proof that you are doing so because you love them. You are not expecting anything back. So this transactional approach to life is killing us. This whole thing of, if I give you this, I must get that. And that thing is not working for relationships. It's not working for relationships. Because suddenly, if I feed you, if you live in the house where I pay the bills, and then I expect that you do 1, 2, 3 for me. That is quite not where we should be. All of us need acceptance. All of us have basic needs, emotional needs, psychological needs, to a point where we come to a place of self-actualization. But none of these things are possible given the present configuration of things. None of these things are possible. Many people die without self-actualization. They actually give up on the journey to self-actualization. They die without knowing who they were, their abilities, their capacity, and everything, because it was just too much to really migrate to that place. Many people do not feel loved. They don't feel accepted. So that sense, the absence of affirmation, is a serious disruption to normality. And most people don't even have access to basic things. They don't have access to basic issues of shelter, and that compromises how people look at themselves. And therefore, it should be expected that issues of anger will be common. Issues of abuse will be common until we deal with these issues. And therefore, I think we must develop a very comprehensive strategy, a holistic strategy that is able to talk to all these issues. Because this whole thing of, just calling each other, calling each other names it's not going to resolve this issue. We are actually not contributing in any good way to South Africa's future if we think the only way out of this is for women to regard men as enemies and for men to defend the indefensible and regard women as deserving of violence. That is not helping us navigate to the future we want to get to. And therefore we must snap out of that infancy, those postures of infancy, and begin to deal with these things as adults. Women deserve to be safe. They deserve to live a life free of harm, free of violence. And I think all of us understand, I think men everywhere understand that is a non-negotiable. That is a non-negotiable. And therefore, we must move from that and begin to say, what is wrong with me? Where can I get help to resolve my predicaments? And therefore, we are going to have local churches coordinate men's indabas. I mean, I know these things have been happening, but we get into these things and it's a talk show. You know when a presenter stands before you and they present a paper that is based on assumptions. They have not sat down with you to really check what is happening in your life, so that we don't have a situation where we call a men's indaba and then the presentations are based on what we read in the papers, what we see on TV, rather than on engaging the men that are in the house, so that we deal with the challenges of the men that have attended that particular indaba. And so these things are very important for us to really understand. I just thought I will take today and focus on this, and I hope this contributes in a positive way to where we want to be as a country and to the type of relationships we want to forge between men and women. I hope it contributes in speeding up reconciliation between men and women. It speeds up the whole issue of rehabilitation of those men who may be crying out for help, and therefore, because they don't understand what is happening in their lives, they are resorting to issues of violence. It is not manly to be violent. There is nothing manly about that. We leave it at this, and I'm gonna say, may the Lord bless the daughters of Africa. May the Lord heal the daughters of Africa. May the Lord protect the daughters of Africa. May the Lord strengthen and empower the daughters of Africa. And of course, may the Lord strengthen and heal the men of Africa. And may the Lord rehabilitate the men of Africa, empower the men of Africa, cause the men of Africa to become an example and a beacon to be admired, something to be celebrated in their interaction with women. The Lord bless you. The Lord make his face shine on you. The Lord lift his countenance towards you. The Lord be gracious on you. May he cause you to know peace in Jesus' name. Amen.